My family's not a fan.
I'm a fan.
Okay. Let me dig it up here. 1 second. So yeah, I think this is becoming kind of like a thing for me where my practice is taking me. It's just kind of, I don't know where it's going, but I'm just sort of following it, you know? And recently I've been thinking about this idea of the cosmic artisan and kind of like looking back through history at other cosmic artisans, which in my definition, my version of it is like someone who like looks towards the future for a better future and like tries to make the world a better place kind of thing in creative ways and doing things that maybe seem a little crazy at the time. So I don't know, let's see, is it rolling? Okay, so thanks for coming out. Oh, I built this amorphous shape out of pallet wood in order to burn it today as an altar for past cosmic artisans. I'd like to dedicate today's burn to the American philosopher and thinker Richard Rorty, who passed away only in 2007. And actually, the reason I know about him is because of Dan Barney, who's here, and it's his birthday. So, happy birthday, Dan. Anyway, so he's a guy I've encountered through my grad work and stuff, a thinker. And his life and work resonates with pragmatism. He was critical about the ways people have done things in the past and championed the pursuit of imagination and creative thought to blaze new trails instead of clinging to outdated and less useful metaphors and structures by which we might still use to guide our lives. He was interested in changing the conversation, especially when things get static or overly dogmatic, to instead direct our attention to what is worthy of it. He advocated that we spend our public energy trying to solve relevant, pressing problems instead of getting lost in the abstract or the esoteric, like worrying about a unified description of truth. He mentions that he's interested in making economic welfare state issues more central, you know, health insurance, local financing of schools, stuff like that, you know, simple economic injustices that are curable with legislation. That's a quote from an interview he gave. Just this past couple of weeks, I've been part of a couple of public conversations in my role as a teacher that I believe perpetuates an ongoing stagnation and point to some systematic and institutional structures that I believe are not just inefficient, but they've become toxic and dangerous problems in the lives of many of our students. The first of these is something that I encounter almost daily at school, student perfectionism. I received an email from a student that I thought succinctly illustrates what I mean. I'll read part of it to you here, taking away their name. Hi, I have a lot of work to do. This is the email I got. I'm not going to lie, I have a very hard time painting. I'm incredibly logical and I also have an issue with everything being perfect. I have work that I pretty much finished, but I just couldn't finish them because I ended up hating it. I was on a school team and I was the same way. I was such a perfectionist. I broke my body down working too hard. I've been having a really hard time lately and I just am wondering what you want me to do since I need a good grade in this class. So that's a pretty common thing that I encounter. And I've had so many conversations with students who feel an unrelenting pressure like this one, who I believe are operating under this paradigm of perfection as a teacher. And as a teacher, it breaks my heart for the toll it's taking on so many young lives. I was thinking about this particular email while I was building this thing, reminding me as I cut and attach these little boards together with one of the primary guiding mantras of my own practice. I call it working with rough construction. So as a reminder to myself, whenever I start to get too sucked into a project and things start to feel too precious or sometimes paralyzing, it's during these moments that I sort of have to shake my head and remind myself, it's just rough construction and I'm just going to burn it anyway. So it's incredibly freeing to just focus on the process of making without worrying about producing something perfect. And speaking of this thing, you might notice that it doesn't really look like anything specific, like some of my past altars have. I did a fortune cookie, a compass, a pencil, a buckyball, and I thought it would be a nice fit for what Richard Rorty was about. Maybe this is what an unfamiliar conversation looks like, or a blind spot. Again, as a teacher, I get to introduce my students to a lot of artwork that might be abstract or challenging in some way. Those are moments when we encounter something that doesn't fit neatly into the schema of our brains. Most of us find it much easier to say, what even is that? I don't get it, it's different, I don't like it, and we push it away from us. But often when we encounter something new or strange or different from what we're used to, if we can suspend our disbelief, give it our attention with an attitude of curiosity and receptiveness to this strange object and its context and history, we can create endlessly fascinating and meaningful connections and make room for it in our brains. So that's what I think learning looks like. Difficult and perhaps scary at first, like when I took Lincoln to Lagoon and he encountered roller coasters for the first time, you know.
Yeah, like me.
He was afraid of it at first, but then when he encountered it with courage and did it, and then afterwards he said, "Oh yeah, I know that one now. I can do it again." And they've mastered it. You know, that's how learning works, right? They're not afraid of it anymore. And Matisse said creativity takes courage, and I think this same kind of courage applies to increased intelligence and awareness as well, which brings me to my second example of stagnant and in some cases toxic conversations that I've been a part of as an educator. A colleague of mine at the high school where I work was recently asked to remove a small pride flag from their classroom. This teacher was simply aware that for many students, seeing a pride flag could indicate and communicate to their students that their classroom is a safe and accepting place for everyone. But because of some of the students and parents perceived it to be a threat to their values, my friend was asked to remove it from their classroom. I know this is a touchy subject for many people here in Utah, and I just want to make it clear for anyone who watches this where I stand in relation to this issue. Forgive me for being a bit personal here, but when I grew up in Utah County as someone from the very large majority, straight, white, Mormon male, who at the time thought being gay meant someone was bad, I didn't even think I knew any gay people back then. I'm embarrassed to admit that I used to say things like, "That's so gay," all the time with my friends without thinking much about it. It was the accepted lingo of the time in my little social sphere. I just wasn't aware of the potential damage that I was perpetuating with my thoughtless comments because I wasn't aware of my own blind spots. And for anyone who worries that a GSA club at a public school is a dangerous idea because it endorses values they don't agree with, I just want to show you a couple of pictures from when I was the GSA faculty sponsor at our high school for a couple of years. This first one is this club is a service-oriented, student-led club designed to be a safe space for students who identify as LGBTQ, as well as for students who are friends and allies of that community. Here we are. Here we are spending an hour after school one day playing with some animals and walking the dogs at the local animal shelter. And here was another activity when we went to serve a meal at the Utah Food and Care Coalition in Provo. So one of my favorite things that Richard Rorty wrote about in the introduction to Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity, he describes his utopia as a future in which human solidarity is a goal to be achieved, not by inquiry, this is quote, not by inquiry but by imagination, the imaginative ability to see strange people as fellow sufferers. Solidarity is not discovered by reflection but created. It is created by increasing our sensitivity to the particular details of the pain and humiliation of other unfamiliar sorts of people. Such increased sensitivity makes it more difficult to marginalize people different from ourselves. So I'm glad he mentioned his utopia. I found it personally very helpful to spend a lot of my time and energy and attention thinking about a better world and actively seeking out my own blind spots and checking my own privilege in order to increase my own awareness, intelligence, and empathy. So with that, and in the spirit of Richard Rorty's life and work, I'd like to dedicate this burn to him. That's it. All right, Link.
Woo-hoo.
Fire it up.
I'm going to pause it.